You are listening to Down Home. A number of scholars and historians have theorized about when the concept of race came about. Filmmaker Raoul Peck, in his docu-series Exterminate All the Brutes, thought that it happened during the Spanish Inquisition. Author and scholar Maria Elena Martinez mirrors his sentiments. When Christians drove Muslims and Jews to convert to Catholicism beginning in 1492, the concept of purity of blood was used to drive that conversion. Physical characteristics and where you were born were the measuring stick of how Christian you were. If you didn't fit in a certain category, you were brutalized. So most likely the concept of race wasn't created during the Atlantic slave trade. But boy, this concept sure was perfected during this time period. This week we have a conversation with CBC reporters Amanda Buckiewicz and Nicole Mortillaro to discuss how science played a part in the normalizing of race as a social construct. Welcome to Down Home, the Nova Scotian experience from two black men. I'm Derek Wise, and as always, we have Jay Jones.
What's happening?
And this week we have a great conversation with two senior reporters from CBC, Nicole Mortillaro. Hello,
Hey.
Nicole. And Amanda Buckiewicz.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here.
Thanks for joining us.
The reason why we actually reached out to Amanda and Nicole is because of their episode that they produced on the scientific origin of race. So we wanted to really delve into your research on that. So there must have been a massive amount of research that you actually did for that episode. Can you kind of break down the scientific origin of race and basically how it became a social construct? I'll let you start off there, Nicole.
Yeah, it's there was a lot of research, and it was a lot of eye-opening research for myself. Going back, I mean, it was there was a lot of things that I didn't know, and we're talking about going back to the 19th century, where the sizes of our skulls, for example, were measured, and it came about it was said that we had a smaller skull and therefore we were less intelligent. And the more research I did, I mean, this was an atlas, actually, and it's incredible to see how wrong it was and what it was used for, which was really a justification of slavery and of treating Black people primarily, but obviously Indigenous people, as less thans. And even things like Henrietta Lacks and talking about the stem cell, like her cells were used for people who don't know in medical research, but it was without her permission. It wasn't something that she agreed to, as important as these are today. But there's also talking about how our intelligence was less, and it was just eye-opening for me. I didn't know this stuff went on, and or being tested, or for drugs. The Tuskegee experiments. That was something that it wasn't even on my radar. How is it that I didn't know that, where these men were experimented on for decades, that lasted for decades.
Yeah.
So that was something for me that was eye-opening and really depressing. And actually, for me personally, as a woman of color, I was getting really angry.
Yeah.
And that was something that I just, like I said, it was eye-opening for me, and really disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah. The amount of resources that went into this research back, decades and centuries ago, huh?
Yeah, it's and all for the justification of trying to say that the white race was superior.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant that everybody else was lesser than, and that they could do whatever they wanted to us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like even now talking about it, I'm just like getting upset again because I just didn't know that. And one of the things too that I thought was interesting was how, for example, they thought that Black people didn't experience pain the way white people did. So a lot of these experiments were done on women throughout history with no anesthesia. And I look, and it was funny because it made me reflect on my own experiences. And I can remember specifically one time I had a somewhat minor operation. It was supposed to be in and out. And I was in so much pain. And they kept getting mad at me because I was like, I need more. And like, I start thinking, this was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And I'm like, was that maybe part of it? Could that have possibly been part of their decision? Maybe they just assumed that I wasn't going to experience pain the way, and anyway, it was very upsetting and very eye-opening. And, the idea of race, it's a social construct, and it's, it has nothing. We are human beings. And it's unfortunate that has lasted throughout, the centuries.
Yeah. And Amanda, like when you were researching this episode, what stuck out to you?
What really stuck out to me was just kind of how blatant it was. Like, they didn't even really try and hide it back then that they were trying to justify slavery. And that they were, the scientists who spoke up and said, no, I don't think this is right. I think Black people are people. They were pushed aside directly. And only the ones that said, yes, they're inferior. They're born to work. They need the structure of the white man to tell them what to do. Like, we're doing them a favor, really. Like, only those people got the funding. Only those people got promoted. Like, it was just, there was no hiding what they were doing. They really legitimately wanted to justify colonialism, justify slavery, and justify all this stuff. And so, Carl Linnaeus is like held up in science as like the father of taxonomy. He's the one who said we have the plant systems and the animal systems, and he really laid it all out. And he was the first one who said, man is also divided into these categories based on the color of our skin, of course. And white people are at the top. We're the best. It's just who we are. We're the best. And, and it kind of listing it down from there. And then, of course, saying that, then it was the indigenous people, and then it was the Asian people. And then, of course, at the bottom was Black people. And they really laid it out there and said, all these things like Nicole was saying that, Black people don't feel pain, and they don't listen to reason, and they like all of these things, and just making it up as they go, just so that they could justify to people in the Americas why they were going to Africa, kidnapping all of these people, taking them over to the Americas, why they were establishing slavery, why this was important. We're doing this to help them. We're doing this to and it was just so shocking to me that there's no nuance. There was no, looking at it now, 400 years later, looking back, it's like, oh shit, you guys knew exactly what you were doing. And you didn't care. And you just didn't care. It's
been the status quo that they always try to keep going, and those systemic things that were paved perpetrate themselves until now. And that's why you get so much Black people sometimes going through traumatic ways, because they're viewed at how they've been viewed all along. And you can't help but attach the pain to that when you sit back and go, interesting. It's really, it really infuriates me,
it almost seems like back then, that type of research and that type of talk was perpetrated for the elites, the people that were the not necessarily the plantations owners, but the business owners, the people that generated from the economy of slavery to justify it, right?
And scientists also benefited from the economy of slavery because, like, they wanted to hitch a ride to go to these foreign lands in order to pick up the cool flora and fauna. They wanted to go dig for bones in Ghana, for example, and that was how they got a ride. Was they were like, oh, okay, yeah, like, slavery is great, cool. Let me hitch a ride on your slave boat. Let's go to Africa. Let me do a bunch of work in Africa, and like they were able to do that. That was a beneficial relationship for scientists too. So it wasn't just them working for the politicians, they were working for themselves too.
Yeah.
And that was how they got access to all of these parts of the world, all these ships and all this knowledge.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
And so they push that agenda as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I say it was blatant, like Nicole and I would message each other every day and be like, holy shit, like, I found this other thing, this other piece of literature, this other book. And like, they were not hiding it. They were really they desperately wanted to have this hierarchy of people to help themselves out.
And it's interesting, you mentioned the flora and the fauna kind of thing. Oh, okay, you're collecting all this stuff. You're going, but they collected people, right? I mean, you think about Sarah Bartman, who was taken from, it was what is today South Africa. And she, look at her big bum, look at her sagging full breasts. And it was all this. And then when she died there, she has a long story. When she died there, it's not like they treated her with respect. They literally dissected her as though she were like part of a scientific thing, dissected her and then put it on display. I mean, we were things. And that's what, this is what they were going to collect, all these other interesting scientific, let's collect people and treat them in much the same manner. And to me, that was just so appalling and disturbing.
Yeah. I remember watching that Raoul Peck docudrama Exterminate All the Brutes. And he had his own, it was based on the book because he had a relationship with the original author, but he had his own kind of theory about a lot of what we're talking about. And he kind of backed up the history almost right to the Spanish Inquisition and how that was kind of like the one of the first major incidences of brutalizing people based on, what they looked like, their religion, where they came from, and kind of said, we don't have slavery without the Spanish Inquisition. And I remember the feelings that it kind of brought up in me because I had no idea, right? So I can imagine the feelings that were coming up, like Nicole, you have talked about some of the feelings that you were feeling when you were researching. Did you have nights when it was on your mind, you were like, oh my God, and like you're sitting there and you're alone?
Oh yeah.
Like, what
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I said, and I think I shared this with Amanda at the time too, it also made me reflect on my own experiences and how I've been treated, because I'm mixed race. I'm half Italian, I'm half Guyanese. I was really raised with my father on the Italian side. And I kind of think that my life saw it through that lens and growing up, which is really disturbing to me. And what I mean by that is like, I would pretend or make excuses for the way I was treated. I'd be like, oh, I was annoying in school and that's the reason why they treated me like that. Well, no, it was mostly Italian area and white people. And there were two other, Black kids in my school, and that was it. And so it started making me look back on my experiences and how I was treated and why I might have been treated that way. So it was working on the special was very much an emotional experience for me. Yeah, absolutely. And it also, hey, we are in the middle of a pandemic and we can still see those racial divides. Yeah. And that vaccine hesitancy. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can understand why, there is hesitancy from the Black community. We've been mistreated and abused and experimented on for centuries. So why shouldn't there be? So it really, yes, every night pretty much was that way.
I bet. And Amanda, like going through this process, what type of emotions did you feel?
I mean, like, I'm a white person, and so obvious, like, it was uncomfortable, right? Like, it is uncomfortable to talk about race and to acknowledge my ancestors' role in creating this and to perpetuate this. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, like, it sucks, like, right, like, it was difficult to go through and difficult to read and difficult to listen to all this stuff and like, and I can only imagine how much more difficult it is if it were my skin color, the one that was being vilified, as opposed to the one that was doing the vilifying, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, like yeah, it brought up a lot. It brought up a lot of just like shame and weirdness, and you know, but like, I was glad that we were talking about it, right? Like, I was really happy that we had this platform where we were able to just be like, holy shit, you guys, did you know this? Because I didn't, and like, we all need to hear it. And that our platform is CBC Radio, which like has a, you know, Quirks and Quarks on CBC Radio has a wide listenership. And so I was shocked and appalled, and then also thrilled that we have this platform that we could just be like, hey guys, here you go, like, these are the facts, take them as you will, but like, this is what happened.
Right. Right.
So, well, with that being said, since CBC is this platform, and they seem to be a lot of people sort of be making the turn to go to telling these diverse stories about you know, the past that we might not have known about or even acknowledged. Did you guys have any challenges getting this episode made, like when you pitched it, or was it something right from jump that you could get into?
No, so I was the one who pitched it. I was the one who proposed this, and I did not. They were hungry for it. They were like, "Yes, please do whatever." I think that like CBC does not have a good track record when it comes to talking about race. Like, I'm not going to say that it's a perfect place, and I know that my Black colleagues have had issues pitching stories about race. Prasinth Matar, you know, she had written an article in the Walrus last year talking about how, you know, she was told that she couldn't cover the Black Lives Matter protest because she was too close to it.
Really?
And it's like, okay, or yeah, I might be misquoting that, but yeah, like there are several instances where CBC is not shown to be good on race. But
right.
That being said, when I said we need to do this special, and and like, I want to do this. I originally actually pitched it, and I was just like, I should not have my hands on this. Like, we need to talk about the scientific role in racism, and it shouldn't be made by a white person. And they were like, well, that's not how this works. You pitched it, you do it.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, well, I can't produce this by myself. And so I knew Nicole's work. Nicole has done amazing work, like science journalism around CBC and stuff like that. And so, yeah, so she tossed her hat in the ring, and I was very excited to work with her on this.
Excellent.
But yeah, we got very little input from the higher ups. They were like, tell the stories that you want to tell. You know, do the interviews that you want to do, like, go nuts, have fun with it. And yeah, so we actually didn't get very much pushback.
Oh, that's good. I mean, yeah, I mean, that sounds encouraging because it really turned out well. So I guess, you know, with your sort of, you know, no obstacles, you could just sort of tell the story how you wanted to do. And you both did a wonderful job. So where do you guys go from here? Like, has this inspired, you know, other things dealing with the issues of race that might not be talked about? Or, you know, Amanda, do you have anything you want to pitch, or, you know?
Well, I mean, I'm mostly, I'm lucky in that, like, I pitch things and I'm generally kind of given a lot of leeway as to what I can do. And so right now I am working on a special about Indigenous science, and how Indigenous science is kind of like rooted in 10,000 years of working the land and studying the land and doing all this stuff on the land. And then Western science came in and was like, no, we're not, like, that doesn't actually exist. And we're going to do it this way. And now we have climate change, and now we have depleted water and nutrients and soils and stuff. And so now there's this movement to get Indigenous science and Western science to actually work together. And shockingly, when we do that, it actually works, and it's actually great for the environment. And so I'm kind of working on a different project about Indigenous science, and I'm also working on another special about the future of food and how we can feed 10 billion people on this planet without destroying it.
Well, all important stuff. And what about you, Nicole? Like, what has this done for you personally? I mean, obviously you were affected by it and brought up a lot of different things. Has it inspired you to sort of touch some things that maybe you wouldn't have before?
Well, first I want to actually touch on something that Amanda had mentioned before in our CBC's history of, not producing or not really paying attention to Black content and et cetera. I will say internally that that is something that they are aiming to really fix. We've had been working on this. I've been part of it as well, on trying to fix that. Because exactly like Amanda said, you can't tweet something or you can't report on something because if you are too close or you are part of that, that's kind of a problem because we are human beings, right? And we bring those experiences with us, and those actually are helpful and so I have been really pushing for more of that. And trying to say like because for example, when George Floyd happened, I was really, really, obviously, as many of us were, really disturbed. And again, I don't know, it really shook me to my core in a way that I had never been feeling before. And I shared my thoughts on Facebook, and I did so very, respectfully and talking about my experience. And in the CBC, you have to be careful as reporters, or front-facing reporters, what you say, and so you're not seen as being biased in any way. And they supported me in sharing that experience, and so that was really important to me. And so it's less about my stories and more about me sharing experiences with through social media and just moving that way. But the other thing is back to stories, etc. But I've also been taking part in, for example, we mentioned it in our special Black in X. So this is a social movement or movement to support Black scientists, and I've been kind of involved in that as well, because there aren't that many. You don't see people of color being represented in science very often. I mean, I know a few years ago I was asked to give a talk for Black History Month for the University of Toronto, David Dunlap's astrophysics department of astrophysics at the university. And they said to me, quite frankly, they said, we're having a hard time finding Black scientists, astronomers to speak at this event. So I've been trying to incorporate that into my own reporting as well. I mean, I always did, but I'm way more conscious about it now. It's just really, it's unfortunate that, that we've been held down, even as advancing in careers or doing whatever, we're being pushed down because we're still seeing the effects of this social construct of race in every aspect of our lives. So it's been more of a personal thing for me to speak out and talk about that.
It's such a, it's such a grand fraud is the way I look at it sometimes, like just the way that seed was planted and what sprouted out of it. And, the people that it affects on the daily, even as you try to sort of be better and come to terms with things and tell your stories and share your stories, there just always seems to be this fight,
Yeah, absolutely.
And like the shocking thing, you were asking about what shocked us, like that it was arbitrary. They could have picked something else to divide humans. They picked skin color because it was easy, but they could have picked hair color. They could have picked height. They could have said people 5'5" and under, top beings. They're the best. Anyone above 6 feet, they're garbage. They could have done anything. And like there was no reason to classify humans and divide humans based on our skin color. It just it didn't make sense. There was no genetic basis for it. You do 23andMe and like that doesn't tell you your skin color. It tells you the environment you grew up in.
Mhm.
That's what shapes your genome. That's what shapes your DNA, where you live. But if you have, a black man from Nova Scotia and a white man from Nova Scotia, you look at your genome, it's going to be very similar.
It will
of
be.
course.
Well,
Very much
it
so.
fits the at the time, from what I know, and I might be wrong, but it fit the economic narrative.
Yeah.
There was a lot of money to be made.
Yeah, absolutely.
And unfortunately, and this is my opinion, there still is a lot of money to be made by dividing us.
Oh, yeah.
That way.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just on a side note, we did talk a little bit about this before we started taping. But this episode will be aired probably in about 4 weeks, because we have a few in the queue. But right now, what's dominating the news cycle is what's going on in Ottawa with the truckers. And I know as reporters, you need to be relatively Switzerland in this, but this is something that we haven't seen in Canada. And, I watched a video this morning before I took my dog for a walk of mounted police in Ottawa trying to clear an area and trampling people.
Yeah.
And
but we have seen that before, right? But we've seen that response when it comes to Black Lives Matter protests. We've seen that response when it comes to the G20,
right.
I was on the ground at the G20 and got punched in the face by a cop just passing by, even though I wasn't doing it. You know what I mean? We've seen that response before. We just never saw it take 3 weeks.
That's exactly the point. I mean, this has been a very slow and methodical, or a very slow process in taking them, but it's different in that we would never see this slow response, this measured response. It would be very unusual. We've never seen it this way. Yeah. So that's what's different about this. And that's somewhat concerning.
It is.
It is very.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you for that. Nicole and Amanda, this has been amazing. Thank you very much for your insight into this subject matter and coming on to Down Home. Thank you very much for your time. Jay Jones, take us out.
Yeah, like Dee said, thanks for sharing your experience of doing what you do, and going forward, telling those stories, no matter what it is, about things that we don't know. I think that's just a cool thing, no matter what color you are, and just sharing what you do with other people and telling these stories that don't get told. I know I'm sounding the same, but I just want to thank you either way. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground.
You have been listening to Down Home. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and like one of the things that surprised me was the actual Canadian angle of it, and how this whole scientific racism was actually part of the founding of Canada, and like Wilfrid Laurier being like, no, we don't accept Black people here because they can't handle the cold. You still hear that today, right? Like, I mean, you still hear like, oh yeah, Black people can't handle the cold, and it's actually that was a government disinformation campaign that was put out to discourage Black people from settling in Canada.
Yeah,
right?
I don't like the cold. Hold on, I don't like the cold.
I don't like it either.
I see the perfect blend, like a diamond in the rough, ready to drop a perfect gem. It's time to shine so fine.
The song Breaking New Ground from The Breakdown.
That rotates around to the surface with a purpose. Breaking new ground.
Breaking new ground and flying high.